Well, welcome along to another edition of the Three Technique, the college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. Preview season keeps rolling along, and we have arrived at the AAC. We're doing half the conference tonight, half the conference in the next episode, and I am pleased to be joined for the first time on our show by Jared Shaffett of the Boneyard podcast. Our audience is very familiar with my love for East Carolina and my belief in the Pirates. And Jared, it's good to have you on the show to talk a little Boneyard.
Thanks, Mitch. Yeah, pleased to be here. Excited now that everything's kind of died down. We've finished up with the NHL finals, the NBA finals, college baseball's over. Hey, now it's time to start talking about college football. And I'm very excited to be here with you.
We're honored to have you with us. Would encourage folks to go find you guys at the Boneyard podcast on Twitter. If you have kind of joined the purple and gold with me and you want to rock with ECU, Jared is doing tremendous stuff, and the Boneyard will have you covered with all things ECU throughout the entire season. Let's start with the Pirates and the absolute turnaround that we saw mid-season last year after Mike Houston was let go. The team just didn't have that identity that they needed to be successful. The offense was sputtering. They promote Blake Harrell, and out of seemingly nowhere to the rest of the country, ECU finds his second gear. Take me all the way back to the regime change from Houston to Harrell. What did you feel immediately as that change was happening?
Yeah, I mean, I remember it. Mike Houston was I remember exactly where I was when I got the news that Mike Houston was being let go. I was in a hotel in Charlotte after a Morgan Wallen concert, but they lost to Charlotte. The next week they went on the road, played at Army, and lost. And honestly, that game was closer for the first half than anybody probably expected. And then, of course, on Sunday morning, it was announced he was let go. Obviously, early on, that was really our first kind of time going through a coaching change since we started the podcast. And so there was a lot of excitement, right? Like, okay, who's it going to be? There's a lot of great names out there. I remember we put together our short list, and then, but we also had this list of, hey, maybe we kind of want to keep Blake. And Blake Harrell is a longtime friend of the podcast. He was the first coach we ever had on the podcast, so we're big Blake Harrell fans here at the Boneyard. But when Mike Houston was let go, it kind of felt like a relief. Like whatever happened last season was going to happen, and then like rebuild this year. Everybody kind of thought that it was going to be a rebuild year, and then Blake went on an insane run with JDB. It was a complete culture change, and I've talked to a lot of former players from the program and even some current players, and the mentality shift was a complete 180 from how things were when Mike Houston was in charge. And so Blake, he can be fiery, but when you talk to him, he's a real salt of the earth guy. And I think it's easier for his athletes to relate to him than it is Mike Houston, who Mike Houston was trying to be the big guy on campus at times. It seemed like he wanted to be the show, and he never really put anything together. Really, his only two decent seasons were because he had Holden Ahlers, right? Mm-hmm. So you had that shift, and then saying, okay, now it was a complete shift with the offense too, right? Jake Garcia is benched in the Charlotte game. Shout out Michigan. Have fun with him. Yep. No hate to Jake. I met his parents before the Liberty game, and they were great people. But yeah, you bench Jake Garcia in the Charlotte game. Caden Hauser comes out, shows a couple flashes in the Charlotte game at the end when it was already out of hand. A game you should have won, like a game on paper, like everybody was like, we should win this game. Caden Hauser comes in, has a decent game, plays all right at Army, and then from there it just kind of took off. I always kind of say like that third quarter when Kane Hauser kind of came in of the Charlotte game is kind of when you started to see things change for the Pirates. And then of course with Houston being let go, that was kind of the nail in the coffin. And then it looked like the training wheels were taken off of JDB, the offensive coordinator, who, I mean, he wants to run this high tempo, like snap it every 30 seconds offense and gas out the defense. And having Blake let him do his thing, you could see it. And it was almost every game, the first drive, they wanted to at least try to throw it downfield, throw a deep ball downfield and put it to the team, to the opponent. So yeah, that. And then when I talk about culture, Mitch, I go back to Coach Harrell and Coach Baker. Both came onto the field. It's something you don't really see much in college football. Both coordinators on the field. And so that was kind of their way. I need to text Coach Harrell and see if is that what we're doing this year with Coach Aldridge and JDB are they going to be on the field? But it'll be interesting to see what they do.
You talked about John David Baker, the offensive coordinator, just a miracle worker last year, takes the offense from 130th in 2023, which was a doom season, right? Finishes inside the top 25 in total offense last year. And a lot of that success, as you mentioned, came with the quarterback change from Garcia to Hauser. It all culminates in a very successful season, a winning season, in a win over rival NC State in the bowl game. And that was when I felt like, okay, people should be aware of who East Carolina is. They're a brand back on the rise. I think everybody certainly believes that ECU should have some success, right? It's a beautiful campus, beautiful part of North Carolina, a lot of resources, a gorgeous stadium. I mean, that was certainly all factoring into when I picked them to rebuild on the college football game last year, right? Great uniforms, a great brand, but the success had eluded them over the last couple of years. It feels like they've turned a little bit of a corner. And so now as we turn the page to 2025, NC State right back on the schedule, a road trip to Carter Finley to open up the season. When we were doing our group of 5 storylines with the group of 5 guys, I went and checked that line, and I believe it was 12.5 points was the line in favor of NC State. I've been very, very outspoken that I believe that East Carolina can pull off that upset. They can double dip on NC State. If that is to happen, start with that game. What are the 2025 version of the Pirates going to have to do well in order to pull off that upset?
I think to pull off that upset, and honestly, like if it happens, I wouldn't even really almost call it an upset. I think the 12.5 line is pretty high, and so if you are a gambler and looking to make some money, maybe hammer that line a little bit. But what I'll say is, looking at the two teams, and these are two teams that had fireworks to end the season. We're expecting fireworks to start the season that Thursday night in Carter Finley. What I expect to see, if the Pirates are going to win, they've got to be explosive on offense, and their defense has to bend but don't break it. And I know, like, hey, we got a new defensive coordinator, somebody to fill in for Blake Harrell, Josh Aldridge coming in from Auburn, but you brought in a lot of studs. I was at the spring game, and you could tell a noticeable difference on the defensive line. So I think that's going to be key. You've got some real heavy hitters in the receiving core. I'm not worried at all about a dip in the offense. That is not even on the radar for me. And Blake Harrell is still there. Now I'm not going to say that he's going to be the one leading the defense, but when it comes down to crunch time, he may very well take over. So it's something that we'll have to watch out for. And on paper, I think ECU got better this offseason and it doesn't feel that way for NC State. Go ahead.
That's been something that I've been somewhat outspoken about too. Is it feels like to project NC State certainly as a 12.5 point favorite. I understand they're at home, they're the ACC team. I get all of that. It feels like you're assuming far more about Dave Doran's club than you are about Blake Harrell's squad as they come on the road. Personally, I feel like, and I love CJ Bailey. I think he's a phenomenal athlete. Turned the ball over a few times last year, but you could see the sparks, right? For me, I just want to see NC State be consistent before I'm going to believe that they can cover that 12.5 point spread. As you mentioned with ECU, it feels like they got better and were one of the hottest teams to finish last season. I think the defense, certainly the front seven, looks really, really good. I know there's some questions in the secondary, replacing Siobhan Revelle. But you've got a safety tandem that, picks passes off for a living. So, to me, it's kind of stock up for the Pirates roster.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the defense and looking at those DBs, I mean, Jamarly Riddle going into his sophomore year, that guy's going to be absolutely a stud. You bring in Tegan Wilk, one of our guys, back. Now, he was a guy, he transferred from ECU, transferred to Houston. He's back this year. So you've got him. You've got a bunch of guys in here that are really kind of, they're not Siobhan Revelle. And a lot of people forget Siobhan Revelle only played 3 games last year.
Yeah.
Right. So you were without him all season, basically. He got injured the week between App State and Liberty. So it's just like, I want to give him a chance. I mean, there's so much depth on defense now too. I mean, and that's the thing about this program is they're still fairly young. I mean, you're looking at a bunch of your guys who are returning starters, either coming in as sophomores this year or they're juniors or they're fourth year seniors. You don't have any real graduate seniors yet. You've got a couple, but for the most part, like you're still fairly young on the defense. So yeah, it's gonna be good to see. I'm excited to see the defense and those ball hawks back there.
Let's wrap with the offense, and then we'll move on to the rest of the teams on our run sheet here tonight. You mentioned the offense shouldn't take a step back whatsoever. I love the wide receivers that you brought in. Jaquez Petaway from Oklahoma, Tyler Johnson coming in from Penn State. You get Parker Jenkins out of the running back room from Houston to add with Montgomery, Marlon Gunn. It feels like if Caton Hauser can take care of the football this season, that the continuity under John David Baker, the momentum that this program has, for me, it's hard not to absolutely love what's going on in Greenville.
Yeah, the thing with the offense and where we've struggled for the longest time is up front. We've always needed a stronger offensive line. You bring in the guy from Maryland. You're retaining your tackles. It feels like you finally got some continuity on the offensive line. I said at the spring game, that was one of my first times being able to see some of these running backs. London Montgomery, he's the number one in my opinion, but this is the best running back room that I've seen in my time as an ECU student, alumni, fan, media, whatever. This is the best running back room that I've seen. And that's when I've seen a running back room with Rajay Harris and Keaton Mitchell, right? So with that being said, I think you've got your kind of like explosive backs. You got a couple of those now. It's always been, okay, you had one. Now you've got a couple of those guys that can break it, shifty guys that either can run it up the middle or bust it outside. You still got Marlon Gunn, who I always affectionately call like a bowling ball. Dude's just kind of a yoked individual. And and then in the wide receiver room, I mean, you continue to bring in talent, not to mention, I mean, you got Anthony Smith and Yannick Smith, not related, But these two guys, and Yannick Smith is a sophomore, right? So these are guys that you bring back who I know in your write-up you talk about Chase Sowell, but I mean at the end of the day, Chase, the reason Chase left, he came in, he was the number one for 2 years. He came in as the number one last year and was quickly moved down the depth chart. Injuries played a part in it somewhat, but that's college sports, right? Like anybody can take your job, and if they take your job, it's hard to get it back. And Anthony Smith becoming the number one, and then Yannick really kind of molding into the number two. Those guys, and they're just so explosive. This offense is made for John David Baker being super explosive, super long, and they're going to give DBs fits because they can just outrun them. There's so much speed on this offense, and that's what they do is they wear you down. They'll throw some short passes over the middle, and then boom, Anthony Smith downfield, 60-yard touchdown. Okay, 4 plays and the drive's over. So that's kind of ECU's MO, and their idea of football is, hey, we're gonna be explosive on offense, and then we're gonna try to take the ball away as much as we can on defense, and give ourselves as many chances as possible to score.
I love it, man. Now wrap up the Pirates with this. What do you realistically expect from Harold's squad this year? Like if you had to put a record prediction out there, obviously we're here at the end of June, still a ways to go before we even get to fall camp, but what do you lean towards?
Yeah, there's a lot of games on here that I see people saying that it's one of the hardest schedules in the conference, and it is a pretty tough schedule. But there's nobody on here that really is like standing out to me as, oh man, they worry me outside of maybe Memphis. Army's lost quite a bit, right? I believe they have the 119th ranked returning next year. Plus they lost Daly. So it's just like, I'm not, it's hard for those service academies to build. We don't have Navy this year, which is, thank God. I hate playing the service academies. Nothing against the military. They're all great.
Respect the troops, but hate playing them. Yeah.
And I hate playing them. And last year we had to play both of them. And we played Navy every year since we've been in the conference, it feels like. And they always put us after Navy, with Navy coming off a bye week for whatever reason. I don't know. And then this year we've got Army on a short week after playing BYU. So it's like,
it's a tough,
Come on, Tim Pernetti, the conference commissioner. Like, give us a break here. But no, I think if you can win the game at NC State, I feel like the next 2 games, you get your FCS game against Campbell, which, I mean, they're never a slouch to play as an FCS team. But still, you should be able to chalk that up as a win. And then having to go on the road to Coastal, I think both those games are winnable. I think ECU could very well start the season 2-1, if not 3-0. BYU is going to be like it's going to be a test, right? So that set, that I guess third Saturday in September is going to be a real test before having to play Army on Thursday night. All in all, like there's a lot of these teams on ECU's schedule. Like kind of the same thing I said about NC State. I feel like ECU got much better. Maybe not much, but ECU got better. And then it doesn't feel like anybody else in the conference really got any better. If anything, they maybe got worse. You've got Tulane, who's always going to be there, but I don't have as much faith in them as I did 2 years ago. Tulsa, I always say crazy things happen when ECU plays Tulsa.
Sure.
I hate playing them too. Temple was damn near the worst team in the country last year. Same goes. Charlotte was pretty bad. They got a new new coach and new staff.
They sure do.
The thing about, and here's the thing about Charlotte. Charlotte is, how do I say this without upsetting your Charlotte fans that listen? Charlotte's a lot like NC State, in my opinion. They always have this great team on paper, and then they can't ever put anything together. Now, I say that, and they beat us. We're 0-2 against them, but all in all, like
I was gonna say, hang on.
All in all, they vastly underperform. Them, Carolina, UNC, and NC State are consistently doing less with more. So we'll see how that game goes. And then Memphis, UTSA, Florida Atlantic. UTSA, I think, is going to be a little bit better. And having to play down there in San Antonio is always tough. Playing on the road at Florida Atlantic, that doesn't scare me. That was the only team we beat, 2 years ago, I guess. Now only FBS team, and we beat them on the road. So I think ECU, I've said it. I think the ceiling, I'm going to eat these words here in about 6 months, but I've still got NC State fans that reminded me that I called ECU to win 10 games probably about 4 years ago. I'm gonna say 9-3 is the ceiling. I think you make a bowl game no matter what. I think the floor of down years is 7-5, but I think it's somewhere in there.
Awesome. I'd be excited to see 9-3 and just continue to
I called it
ladder.
I called it 2 weeks ago on the podcast. I think, and look, a lot can happen. A very underrated game in the conference this year is going to happen November 15th in Dowdy-Ficklen Stadium, ECU versus Memphis. Those games, the last 2 times ECU's played Memphis, both games have gone to overtime, one of which went to double overtime. So there's always craziness in that game. Mark that date on your calendar if you're looking for a depth game to watch. ECU Memphis, and there may be some if everything goes the way that I think it's going to go for ECU, you may be having some American Conference Championship implications on the line there.
Boy, I hope so. I think Memphis has a bunch of interesting games this year. I've got that one circled. I've got the Memphis USF game circled as well. That should just be a boatload of fun.
USF is the team that I think everybody loves them, and then they never do anything.
Losing Byron Brown last year definitely hurt. I do think this is kind of not a make or break year, because I don't necessarily know that the Bulls let Golish go if they don't have a super successful year, but it does. I do think we're approaching probably the part of his tenure where it is a lot of sizzle, maybe not a lot of steak to this point. I still believe in Golish personally. I think that USF is a program that is moving in the right direction. I think their athletic department has realized, hey, we can compete and still have a place in college football. And so I'm encouraged by that. But their schedule's brutal as well. They have a disgusting schedule once again. So, the wins don't just jump off the page at you down there in Tampa. Take me to the service academies. Let's talk Army and Navy. You mentioned you have Army this year. You don't have Navy. Probably the best outcome in that scenario, because Army is replacing so much, specifically on offense, right? Bryson Daly's gone. Udo's gone out to Arizona State, their lead running back. Dwayne Coleman, a Texas native, actually takes over at quarterback. He started one game for Army last year, took over the Air Force game and led the Black Knights to a win. But they've still got Jeff Monken. And Jeff Monken is a guy that seems to get the very best out of his players year in and year out. It seems like you're a little bit more down on the Black Knights this year than maybe even the rest of the country is, expecting them to take a step back.
Yeah, I think I said it when we first looked at like the matchups before we even knew dates for these games. I thought that Army, I would rather play Army next year than play Navy.
Mm-hmm.
Just as an ECU fan, they're replacing a lot. Look, I hate playing them. I hate playing Army. I hate playing Navy. I said it earlier. I'm going to say it again. I hate seeing them on our schedule. And once again, it's not anything against the service academies, the military. It is purely because I get so tired of watching how those teams honestly can dismantle your defense. And it's just it's a constant. And I mean, they run the triple option, but it's a little bit different than what Navy does. And it's like, okay, you got to prepare for it, and you are prepared for it. But no matter how much you prepare, it doesn't matter until you get into the game. And especially coming off of a short week this year for ECU.
Yeah.
I mean, you play Saturday against BYU, and congratulations, you got Army coming in 4 days later, 5 days later.
Yeah.
Not an ideal situation, but if ECU is going to do it, I think with the explosiveness with their offense, there's a good opportunity there. I'll always say the mantra on defense: you can give up yards, bend, but don't break. If you can, at times hold them to a field goal rather than letting them score a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
If you do that, you're gonna win the game. It's gonna be close. It's gonna be a ugly hour of football, but if you do that, you're gonna win the game. And it's all about possession. And Army and Navy are the best teams at possessing the football, right? They burn the clock, and then Army, especially last year, had that very with Bryson Daly, he could be so explosive because they lull you into that triple option, they lull you into that option, and here comes a tight end over the middle, and 45-yard, 60-yard touchdown, bang, right? Which is really hard to recover from.
Yeah,
I don't know that. The thing with Army is you can't transfer in; you can transfer out.
right.
So a lot of these guys being the 119th team and returning, right? A lot of these guys aren't proven, and it's already so hard for these schools to recruit. You get on where they get kind of a flash in the pan for a year or two, and then they kind of fall off, and the fall off is pretty drastic. So I'm kind of expecting that this year with Army.
Yeah, it's a good point. Their success does seem to be somewhat cyclical, right? It's rare that we have both Army and Navy both really, really good at football at the same time. And now, especially in this transfer portal era where you mentioned no transfers in, as many guys can transfer out as they want. You saw that from Udo going to Arizona State. Elo Modozi goes to Georgia, one of their top edge rushers from last year. I think if there's anything to believe in for Army this year, I mentioned Jeff Monken, obviously, captain, my captain,
Yep.
right? I'd follow that guy anywhere. The defense is somewhat more intact than the offense is this year. They return over 2/3 of the production on the defensive side. And that is where the continuity lives. And so if that offense, to your point, can figure things out early, if Coleman can kind of take the reins himself, and they play their brand of football where they're bleeding the clock, limiting those possessions, and the defense can find a way to stop you, all of a sudden Army starts to get kind of spicy again. So that's what I'm looking for in West Point. You flip it over to Annapolis and talk about the Navy midshipmen, and they've got so much production coming back. So they're right in the middle of that cycle where this is the go zone, right? Blake Horvath is back at quarterback. They return playmakers on defense. Navy suddenly feels like, okay, Army won the conference last year, and I titled this as the title of part one of my article. Could the service academies go back to back as AAC champions? How likely do you put that at happening, given what Navy does bring back versus maybe some of their opponents?
Yeah, I think Navy is in a better spot, and like I said or you said, it's all cyclical with these academies. They go up, they come down. The crash is pretty hard, but once you start getting these guys that have experience and really, I mean, they train for this football, right? They play their style, and that's all they play. There's nothing else to it. They're going to play their style. If you stop it, oh well. If you don't, you're going to have a long day. And I think Navy, with that experience, is poised to have a good season. I don't know that I'm on the bandwagon to put them as a top contender in the conference, but I definitely think that they're maybe in the second tier, kind of where honestly where I have ECU at this year, is kind of in that second tier, in the conference. So I think they're gonna have a shot at it. I think they have a better shot than Army does.
Yeah, very fascinated to see what Brian Newberry runs back for this 2025 season.
And I've got to give a shout out. You talked about one of your long time friends or long time guest on the podcast earlier, but I want to give a shout out to one of ours, who tragically lost his battle with cancer. Pete Medhurst, the former analyst or play-by-play voice of the Navy midshipmen. We'd had him on 4 or 5 years, and Pete was a fantastic individual. So he lost his battle, I believe, in November or December, but long time friend of the podcast and long time broadcaster for Navy and along with the Washington Nationals, the Redskins, Commanders, whatever they call them now. But yeah, just wanted to give him a shout out here on your podcast.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Truly one of the best in the business. Was very familiar with his work during my own broadcasting career, and yeah, definitely Navy football will not be the same without him. So I appreciate that shout out. Let's transition then to one of the teams that you do consider to be, I believe, one of the top contenders. You'd mentioned them a couple times earlier, the Memphis Tigers. All right, so close last year to paying off those lofty expectations. The final year of Seth Hennigan, another guy that's native to where I am in North Texas. I covered him in high school, watched him win that state title, and then he went and truly became a legend at Memphis. I'm firmly on the block that they owe him a statue somewhere, right? Maybe funded by FedEx, I don't know, but they're going to have to replace not only his production on the field, but his leadership in the locker room as well. And they bring in a couple of new guys. AJ Hill is a 4-star quarterback, a blue chipper who, got a very nice NIL deal from that FedEx collective, right? And certainly wants to be a part of what's going on for Ryan Silverfield's Tigers. They also bring in Brennan Lewis from Nevada, who kind of restarted his career a little bit for Nevada last year. Obviously, the wins didn't come for Jeff Choate's squad, but I think the Wolfpack were a lot more competitive, certainly in that opener against SMU, than what a lot of people expected. So when you look at Memphis having to replace, quite a bit in terms of leadership, Rock Taylor is gone at the wide receiver spot as well. The defense was quite honestly an enigma at times last year, right? They couldn't stop Navy to save their lives. And then it's like they built a stone wall against Tulane on Thanksgiving night. So when you kind of prepare for what Memphis will be this year, and they're on ECU's schedule, what are you expecting from the Tigers?
Well, like I said earlier, with anytime ECU plays Memphis and Ryan Silverfield and that squad, he's always, his teams are always very well prepared. And I think, and he's a hell of a recruiter. And so being able to bring in studs like Hennigan and all these other guys, they just reload. And they're always kind of at the top of the conference, but eventually they've got to finally break through.
Yeah.
Right. I think that this year is their best opportunity to do so. It seems like a lot of the teams, especially the lower, maybe those bottom tiers of the conference, I don't honestly know their full schedule, but it just feels like this is the year for them. I mean, looking at their conference schedule, yeah, they have us, they have Navy, but like I don't think playing UAB or South Florida, Florida Atlantic, like their non-conference schedule is pretty tough.
Yeah.
With Troy and Arkansas, but outside of that, like I don't see a team on here that they can't beat come the fall.
Yeah, it's interesting. They reloaded, as I mentioned, at the skill position players. They bring in guys like CJ Smith from Purdue, who's a bright spot for the Boilermakers, Jaden Thompson from Louisville. They get Jerry Cross, a former highly regarded tight end and blue chip prospect from Penn State. The defense, they had to replace almost everybody. And, depending on who you talk to, that might be a good thing. That might be just inherently a bad thing with so much transition. But Jared, you look at the guys that they brought in, like Omarion Cooper from FSU, Miles Pollard from Michigan, Joey Hunter from Akron. All of these guys are very solid members of the secondary at cornerback, and then they get a couple of safeties as well from Michigan State and Arizona State. Sam Brunfield comes in from Virginia Tech. I know that the Hokies haven't done much of anything as a program, but boy, it feels like they've always got a couple of guys that have been productive and certainly have high ceilings. And I think Brumfield is one of those. And then they get one of their top pass rushers back from last year in William Whitlow Jr. as well. So it feels almost like, yes, the teams have to be more than the sum of their parts if they're going to be special, right? If they're going to, and a lot of times, win a conference championship. But boy, it feels like Ryan Silverfield has pulled all the right levers. You mentioned he's a good recruiter. It feels like it's just a matter of time before Memphis truly puts it all together and ascends the mountaintop.
Yeah, I think they've got to do it at some point. They just have to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know. They're always them. It's always them, USF and Tulane that are super hyped up. Army had a little bit of hype last year going into the season, but it's always them. And really, out of those three, Tulane's the only one that's ever really done anything,
Mm-hmm.
right? Tulane's kind of taking a step back. They're still there. I still put them in top tier at this point, but Memphis, I think, is kind of the belle of the ball when it comes to the American Athletic Conference, when it comes to football and honestly basketball. But yeah, I think they've got to do it, and that's an athletic department that I wonder if he can't start getting it done. He's always got the best team on paper. Everybody's always talking about his team. Do they have to start considering other options down the line? I don't think that's really in the cards right now, but it's something that, hey, if you can't get over the hump, especially in the new age of the college football playoff, there's an automatic bid, right, to be had. You got to get over the hump and be the best G5 team and win your conference championship.
Boy, I think it's on the table for Memphis. I don't know that too many people are going to necessarily be projecting them to go to the college football playoff this year, just because that schedule is
it's rough.
Has some landmines. Yeah, for sure. And anytime you don't know who the quarterback is and you don't have a defense that's continuous, can lean on, right, to help win those championships, those definitely put up red flags for me. But I'm definitely an interested onlooker to see what Silverfield does this year.
I really hope come November 15th. I really hope that the country is turning all eyes to Dowdy Ficklen Stadium and saying this is a big time game with American Conference championship implications. And also, I don't think, I mean, I'd have to look at everybody's schedules. I don't know that I'd say that the American Conference champion is going to be the representative for the G5, but it'll be interesting to see kind of how it plays out.
Certainly an advantage maybe for ECU in that game as well. Not only do they get the Tigers at home, it's the week after the Tulane game for Memphis. So, maybe a quote unquote trap situation. I don't think they're going to be taking the Pirates lightly, but it's a little bit of a tough stretch there for Memphis. The last two teams on our run sheet for tonight, Charlotte 49ers and the Florida Atlantic Owls. Now, it seems like you're mostly out on both of those programs, and I think for 2025, that's certainly fair. But I am curious to know, as an in-state quote-unquote rival, right, that Charlotte is, they bring over Tim Albin, who has worked miracles at Ohio. 3 straight 10-plus win seasons. He wins the MAC this last season after 8 starters left his team after spring ball. The other MAC coaching staffs truly seem in awe with what he did in Athens, Ohio. He now leaves and brings some of that talent with him to Charlotte, a program that has been in disarray despite having some resources and some natural built advantages given their location. I don't know what they're going to look like this year, and the schedule is brutal for the 49ers, right? It's hard when you look at it on paper even to maybe get them to 4 wins. Over time, though, maybe give it 2, 3, 4 years with a coach like Albin, do you believe that Charlotte can become any sort of presence in the American?
Yes, I think that they can. I think that there's going to be more complications for them to get there. I mean, they've tried to do a pretty good job of at least showing that they're investing in their athletic departments. But just like what we've seen at other places in this state, just because you're investing doesn't mean that you're going to be like that team, right?
Yeah.
You bring in Biff and with his cutoff T-shirts and all that, and we're really pumping money into NIL. We're bringing in guys from Florida. We're bringing in guys from all over the country. We're going to be the best team in the conference, and a lot of people had them there. And then what do? They pee down their leg. That's just what they've done. And then now you've got to rebuild quite a bit. You bring in Tim Albin. Yeah, he brings in some of his guys. Look, Ohio and playing in the MAC, it's very competitive, but it still is a step up when you, at least for half of your games, I would say, when you're playing in the American, and it's you're going to go into some different environments. Then I'm not saying that against Tim. I think he was on my short list when ECU was looking for a coach. Yeah, he was on my short list, and it was somebody I wanted to have in Greenville, but I just don't see it. They've poured money into the program. They're trying to pour money into the stadium renovation. It doesn't seem, and this is from an outsider's perspective, it seems like they have the donors, but it doesn't seem like the actual athletic department in the program has the revenue to really compete with some of the top programs in the conference. In all honesty, when you pull back the curtain and look at the numbers, your top 3 revenue generators in the conference are Tulane, Memphis, and East Carolina. And so having that, like, they're still pretty far behind, especially now with the move to having more excuse me, revenue share. That's gonna be tough for Charlotte, because Tim Pernetti has already made it clear, hey, in 3 years you have to have a plan, or for the next 3 years you have to give $10 million back across your athletic department.
Yeah,
I don't know that Charlotte's going to be able to do that at times. There's a lot of teams in this conference that I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. And when he said that, it was, hey, if you don't do this, there may be implications against your program going forward in the conference.
Which, truly a rock and a hard place for both the universities and the conference, because obviously Pernetti wants the American to stay relevant. He wants the American to be a championship contender, right?
I'll be honest with you. I don't think Charlotte's what makes the American Athletic Conference relevant.
Well, certainly not. Certainly not as of late. I mean, more in general, him having to look at programs and say, hey, we listen,
Look,
we're running a business here, right?
and I think at the end of the day, I think Tim Pernetti is moving in the right direction. Um, I like the direction of the conference, but I think the last round of realignment, bringing in the schools you brought in, the Conference USA schools that you brought in, didn't move the needle. Look,
Mm-hmm.
this past week, ECU got called by the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt
Sure.
called East Carolina this past week or 2 weeks ago recently and said, "Hey, would you be interested in joining?" And ECU hung up the phone. And there's more money to be had there, but you've got to win ball games, and you've got to have kind of that notoriety. The schools they brought in, they have the markets, they don't have the notoriety. I think that you could almost easily replace any number of those schools from Conference USA. Maybe the hard one would be UTSA.
Sure. Interesting dynamics, man, as the realignment
Give me to
carousel continues to spin. It's nuts.
2031. 2031. Just get me there and see where we're at. Maybe I'll be wearing a Pac-12 hat or a bit. I would love to have a Big 12 patch on the ECU jerseys.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I've called the ACC conference the All Faiths conference after absorbing SMU, Stanford, and Cal. So, I mean, truly borders mean nothing today in college realignment. Last team is FAU, and the Owls, similar boat where 2025 is probably going to be a year dedicated to the process, right? But they bring in Zach Kitley. They've got Caden Veltkamp, Western Kentucky's quarterback. They were together in Veltkamp's first year for the Hilltoppers. Veltkamp obviously didn't get to play that year, but it felt like a partnership that we'd kind of deserve to get. We're now going to get in Boca Raton. FAU, and we just recorded our Conference USA preview at the beginning of this week, and that's out on our YouTube channel as well. So we talked about Florida International as well. So many resources and advantages with where they are in the state of Florida, and yet those programs have struggled. Yet they get a guy in Zach Kitley who's young, who has a distinct offensive identity. It seems like that should play very well with all of the abundance of skill talent that exists in the high school ranks down there in Florida.
I've always said that Florida Atlantic could be a sleeping giant in the conference, much like USF. USF is on a larger scale, both by enrollment and endowment, and they're leaps and bounds ahead of them. But Florida Atlantic has Boca Raton, and it's easy to sell that to a high school junior, senior. Hey, come play at the beach. And by the way, you're in Florida. It's sunny all the time. Even during the winter, it's going to be 75. It's going to be a perfect place to play, perfect place to live. And not to mention, you're living in Florida, especially in the days of the NIL. Guess what? No state income tax.
Yeah.
So stay here, do that. I think the schools in Florida really need to be using that to their advantage. But especially in Boca, being able to show their potential athletes like, hey, this is where you could live, and then show them the Final Four run from a couple years ago for basketball. Show them, hey, like we play good sports here. I think they could use a little bit better branding, but otherwise, I think that they've got a lot going for them. It'll be interesting to see what happens to them in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the no state income tax, right? Which even made headlines in the NHL playoffs. Paul Bissonnette saying, "Hey, the NHL's got to rethink this when we talk bargaining, because Florida has this built-in advantage." Which I don't necessarily think he's wrong, but it was an interesting point.
When you're dealing with a salary cap, it really is a more of an advantage. But at the same time, and we were talking before this. I used to do a hockey podcast. I'm a big hockey fan. Go Carolina Hurricanes. But if that were the case, and you see it more and more now, yeah, I mean, Tampa and Florida have been to the Stanley Cup Finals for the last 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
You got Dallas, Texas, no state income tax.
Right.
Nashville, Tennessee, no state income tax. Las Vegas, Nevada, no state income tax. Seattle, Washington, no state income tax. So you've got all of this. You've got a lot of these teams, and the ones that are performing well, the Vegas, the Stars, the Florida teams, look, they have a couple things that they can sell. Hey, it's going to be sunny and 75, sunny and 85 almost all year long, and you don't have to pay state income tax. Mm-hmm. So those are two key selling points, especially in the NHL, that they can pitch. You're not seeing the teams, the Nashville team or Seattle team, do as well right now. I mean, Seattle's still new, going into their third year in the league, but you're not seeing them do the things that these other teams in the southern part of the United States are doing, because they have the weather and they have the no state income tax. So
right.
We'll see what happens, but I think it's going to be a big deal come the next 2 or 3 years in NIL. If you're a head coach or if you're running an NIL in one of those states, I would damn sure be pitching that as, hey, look at what we can do.
Yeah, no doubt. There's the FAU NHL crossover you didn't know existed to finalize the show here. But Jared,
Stanley Cup champs.
There you go. A lot going on in the state of Florida.
But between them and the Costco guys, man,
that's right. There's just all kinds of built-in advantages down there, right? Jared, it's been a blast getting to have you on the show here tonight. Let the folks know where they can find you one more time.
Yeah, you can find all of our stuff at Boneyard Podcast or on social media at the Boneyard Podcast on TikTok. Subscribe to our YouTube. You can see my beautiful face. I was telling Mitch before we came on, usually wear a hat, but you can see me and my co-host Artemis in all of our glory. And I'll say this: we talk football. We don't talk as much X's and O's. It's more of a gut and an opinion show. So if you're into that, if you're looking for something different, check us out. Yeah. And if you don't, you can walk the damn plank.
There you go. Love it, brother. All right. Well, there you go. There's the first half of our American Athletic Conference preview. Stay tuned for part 2. We'll have JD Davis of the North Texas Eagle back on the show. Looking forward to that. But Jared, it's been a blast tonight. Good luck to the Pirates. Yeah, let's have a college football season, my friend.
For sure. Send my best to JD.
Definitely will. All right, guys, we appreciate you guys listening to the episode, watching it over on YouTube. If you are not following the show, or if you just found us on one of the platforms, head on over to our Twitter account. We're doing a big time giveaway, giving away a couple $100 in home field apparel gift cards. We're giving away a brand new digital copy of College Football 26 as well. We've got a post pinned at the top of our social media, so follow the instructions there. You'll be entered into win all of those prizes. Well, for Jared Chaffett, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Until next time, so long, everybody.